with the survey is that I will show you. Let's show. That survey vocabularies are very heterogeneous in structure. So all of them they have a huge amount of specific data that and sometimes they intersect between each other, but and mostly they have a lot of different. Survey vocabularies bring a lot of standard concepts, and often they are misused by OMOP users because they are standard and people do not look at the domains and to use them as target for mappings and for cohort buildings. So a lot of problems exist with that. As they have a lot of standards, they violate the principle of unique standard concepts, which means that for each entity we have only one standard concept. But as we don't know how to standardize surveys, for now we have a lot of semantic duplicates in this group of concepts, and that's one of the problems. Also, we have a convention that no standard concept should indicate a flavor of null. So if something is unknown, no reported, or carries other negative information, it should not be a standard concept in the OMOP ecosystem. But as we know, in surveys, sometimes negative information also values and matters. And for now, we don't have a good decision for this problem. Also, we assume that our survey data should not refer to the timing. So if we have any semantics that says something about the timing, we just ignore it, and we should not rely on the vocabularies, but on the data you have in your sources. That is the picture that represents the problem of the violation of unique standard concept principle, where we see that where we see that we have a standard condition, diabetes mellitus. We have non-standard conditions from ICD vocabulary that are mapped to diabetes mellitus in SNOMED. And at the same time, we have diabetes mellitus as lowering answer that is not actually a condition. It may refer, off the top of my head, to the observation domain. But semantically, they look equal, and sometimes they cause confusion for ETLs and phenotypers. So, we had actually attempted mapping survey data, and it was not a disaster, but very, very challenging, and we didn't achieve any good result here. So as you see that we have on the upper half of the slide, we have an example of 3 standard vocabularies that have 3 semantically equal concepts. When did you quit smoking? And at the same time, they have answer in their intrinsic vocabularies, and these answers are different. So they are not equal throughout the vocabulary. So when we try to map We assume that LOINC will be standard concept, and we map the equation to the one standard concept of LOINC. And on the next step, we try to map answers. And when we try to map answers, we have some confusion here because as in UK Biobank, we have 16 years or younger, and we don't have the same category in the standard vocabulary. So we have may assume that it may mean 11, 16 years in LOIC or 10 years or younger in Snorment and map to this concept, but it doesn't represent the fully equivalent standard target.
So yeah, let me just quickly interrupt you and try to somehow summarize it. And I'm also like appreciate if someone will ask the questions, because you understand that the topic is quite complex, and just my apologize for being me saccadic and jumping from one step to another. So the basically idea and the first attempts we implemented when we do the survey mapping or EAV mapping in OMAP was quite natural. So we were thinking that the best strategy is just map questions to questions and answers to answers. But what we realized at the very, very end is that even, for example, if the question is fully harmonized and could be equally mapped between different terminologies, the trick may lie within the answer categories, because different systems, different standardized instrumentary may have different envision on how to represent these artifacts, like you see in UK Biobank and PPI. So chronologically, the main decision why we state and declare that the LOINC standard is that basically we introduce it earlier, and then we start to process the UK Biobank and PPI as terminology sets. And what we realized is that they are not cohesive, and the direct mapping is not something that is truly possible in this particular situation. So that's it. And maybe like you have some questions and we can touch on this approach a little bit. Maybe you have some thoughts or ideas or tested this idea internally with your custom surveys or whatever.
Yeah, Diane?
Yeah, hi. We did actually try to map our data, our survey questions this way originally when we were first starting with OMOP 2. The main concern, I guess, that we came up with, and then we were kind of at a standstill when we came up with this concern, was most survey questions that we deal with anyway are validated instruments. And so they have very clear-cut questions and very clear-cut answers. And if we're not able to find those exact questions and answers within the OMOP vocabularies that are already standard, we felt like we were doing a disservice to mapping of those specific surveys, because they kind of lost a little bit of the integrity of those very specific questions and very specific answers. So we've gone through this exercise as well, and we've come to the same conclusions, I think, where it's very hard to find in one vocabulary question and answer pairs. So that was one of the big questions that we had coming into this working group and trying to get best practices together, is how to keep the integrity of those very specific question and answer pairs together within the OMOP.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, Vlad, if there's a response, fine.
No.
John,
yeah, for sure. Let's continue, John. Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah, so it sounds like a big part of the problem is that this idea of survey and question answer has overloaded in it, the first function that it serves is to capture how did the person actually answer this question? What was the question and what was the answer? And you can do that through concepts. You can do that through custom concepts that represent that exact survey, that exact standardized survey. But then, looking at this diagram conceptually, what is the semantic meaning of that? What does it mean to have said yes to question 23? And in this case, it means that I was a smoker and no longer am a smoker. Well, let's simplify the example. Let's say the question is, do you smoke? Yes or no? And so you can encode that and say, here was the question, here was the answer. And that's an observation, I'm guessing. But then the question comes, how do I now go find all my smokers based on that? And where does that happen? Is that part of an ETL process? It sounds like that there's not a place to capture those two pieces of information and attach them to each other. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. It sounds like the model could be improved by saying, here's the question, here's the answer, and here's what that answer to that question means. It means this person is a smoker. And then does that become part of your ETL process? Do you say, okay, we have these observations, we have this survey, and the question was, do you smoke? And the answer was yes. And so as part of our ETL process, we're going to create a record that says this person is a smoker. Am I close?
Yeah. I'm just going to chime in real quick, John, because I think you very well defined the problem. So what you just described, and correct me if I'm wrong on the vocabulary side, is the difference between mapping the question answer pairs and mapping a fact. So what you're talking about, just mapping the fact that somebody is a smoker, as opposed to mapping the question answer pair, which is described here. And it may be a situation where, because of the desire to preserve, we end up wanting to do both. And then I'll get to the other two questions, but Oleg, I know you have something that's going through approval or has been approved with the CDM relative to preserving the original information. So maybe after we get through the next couple of questions, you could talk about that a little bit. And then,
yeah, that's possible. Yeah, let's go through the questions and maybe we can circle around. I'm sorry, I missed the first part of at least the first 15 minutes. So
yeah, we mostly did introductions because we knew you guys would make it. So
thank you.
Yeah. Laura, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you very much. So I was wondering if for the answers, if there was any hierarchical structure for the answer set. So for example, in childhood would encompass 16 years and younger and 10 years and younger. So if there's sort of that it is based in a hierarchy so that you could more easily find it. Because what we also found, at least for the H2O project, and please, people from the Erasmus, correct me if I'm wrong, but we found that there were a lot of actually mainly Likert scale answers. So it's usually never, always, etc. But they are often linked to a different qualifying number that eventually gives the score. So it is always very similar. So what we also used a lot is qualifying the values in the ETL based on the questionnaires. But I was just now thinking maybe the hierarchical answers would also be very convenient, because then it doesn't really matter which, if you then at least want to see everyone who hasn't smoked or quit smoking from their childhood, you would encompass all the people that would fit within childhood.
Yeah, that's perfectly makes sense, at least for me, just like last 5 minutes before I drop. I love the idea with having hierarchical structure for any mesh value, but the trick here is that as Odyssey vocabulary is designed to adopt what already exists in the majority of cases, so we try to avoid any de novo creation of vocabularies. And in this case, like the vocabularies that already contains a huge amount of codes that belong to the answer category, they do not have this hierarchy. So SNOMED, for example, do have but let's Masha clarify and correct me if I'm wrong. But for lawyering cases, there is no any way how to grab the answers other than assigning it to the particular question. So that's the only way how to organize the answers. But the idea basically is great. But in terms of the maintenance, it will become a nightmare for everyone who do it, because we need to create it and we need to maintain the hierarchy and understand the reasoning, how to align all the elements that are coming from diverse terminologies in this case. So yeah, that's the hierarchy may assist here, but what we currently have is not a working solution.
So it seems like that's kind of part of the problem too. Is I've asked a lot of people, how is survey data modeled in CDM today, and nobody wants to commit to an answer. And I think a big reason for that is because it's not. They're looking to the next generation. They want a better solution. So rather than saying this is the way it is and having a baseline that we can move on from, everybody's looking at how can we do this better. And so I think before we can really start moving towards how can we do this better, we need to really well define how is it done now? What are the best practices now? And how are people doing that? Because I have a really hard time getting an answer for that.
And I think part of that reason is because it's not consistent. Yeah, right. So when you look at UK Biobank and PPI is actually from all of us, the solution has been, we just want our concept IDs. We want to get an OMOP. We're just going to get these added to Atlas and the vocabulary.
But nobody's willing to admit to it. Nobody's willing to show that dirt and say, this is our solution. We know it's not a clean solution, but this is how we're doing it today. You ask people, how do you model survey data in CDM? They say, we'll get back to you. We're working on it.
And then I would say, and then Diane, and I wish Piper had been able to join this call, because I think of the members of our group up until now, you've had the most experience with actually trying to work in the framework that Masha and Alexander are describing. And so yeah, so I think that, but that's a good point. Like, I think one of the things we've kind of found challenging is, what can we share out that's already been done and do that in one place, so at least there's not this complete reinventing the wheel, but we also know that the current solutions are not ideal solutions, and that while it can give you the benefits of harmonization within a study, we're still not at the point where we're really able to use map survey data the same way we can use mapped EHR data. So I agree. It's sort of like, what have people done? What of this can be reused? So, Diane, you've mentioned using a lot of standardized clinical surveys. So depending on issues with copyright and use and whatnot, but those are not going to change. Those have been validated. It might, that might be something very helpful to start with. But yeah, it's definitely like part of the challenge is just getting the information for what's been done, and what's been shared is pretty sparse. We had, and I'm grateful to them because they did give us a lot of good information. We had about 10 responses to the survey when we were doing our landscape assessment, and then probably another half a dozen or less who come to us to talk about how they're doing it. And now this greater interaction with the vocabulary group. So we are a new group. It's taking time to build this up, but yeah, I think we're still largely in that fact-finding place. Sophia?
Yeah, I just wanted to say from my experience, so even things like UK Biobank, so I was part of a team that we mapped the data for Eden, and that was in parallel when this vocabulary work also was happening from Odysseus side. So there was also a working group on how to coordinate the efforts, and still, like, even the UK Biobank data have been mapped differently because in the intent mapping we try to find like and reuse everything that was there rather than wait to have the complete vocabulary. And we only use stuff that we couldn't find, and we use the actual UK Bible vocabulary. So even there are differences between the mappings. And then, when you have things that are validated, it becomes even more difficult because you have to have the exact thing, so you cannot really divert much. But that's my experience, that's all.
Yeah, but it's helpful. We want everybody's experiences. So that's good to know. And then part of it is trying to bring those processes, right? So if there were standards for mapping this in Eden, can we find those? Can we put the associated, GitHub repos in essential, not move the repo, but it has links to what other groups have been. So that's one of the things I've been trying to gather, are those types of information so that, folks like John can come in and say, see, this is what's been attempted. Can you use it? Can you have thoughts about improving on it? And, and going from there. So yeah, anything anybody wants to share links to our wiki would be very much appreciated, because that is one of the things we're trying to do, is just centralize these efforts. All right, I don't see any more hands. Masha, did you want to pick up where you left off? Or if this is your last slide, then Oleg, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you've proposed and gotten approved.
We have some slides more, so
okay, go ahead.
Let's proceed with them, and we will stop wherever we want. So if you have any questions or notes, please just stop me, and we will discuss. So let's proceed. Well, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So we see that it's the discussion of the survey data lasts for years, and it's still very fundamental question which we don't have any answer for. So currently we have some existing approach for mapping of surveys. For example, if you have questions, including yourself, who in your family has had asthma, and if we have a precoordinated pair, and we have from the beginning, we have both post-coordinated surveys, such as questions and answers as distinct concepts, and then we just link them together with some kind of relationships. But survey data may also be represented as a pre-coordinated question and answer pair. And as we see in the example, we have PPI concept, which is pre-coordinated, where the joint, the source is joined together question and answer, including yourself, who in your family has had asthma. The answer is daughter, and this concept might be mapped, and we map it as we post-coordinate them to the family history. We map it to family history with context pertaining to daughter, and put the question, the value asthma as a condition into map, using maps to value link. So in this case, we just make a vice versa. So we put an answer in the main target, and put the condition from the question into the value. And at the same time, we have as I said, we have post-coordinated surveys, which where we have question and map question to question and answer to answer. We have a standard LOINC vocabulary and map answer to standard. So this is one more option. So this is like this slide is like a summary of what I said. So we may map one-to-one and may post coordinate a survey into or map into two. Okay. So here we have also pre-coordinated pairs. It's currently one of the most common variants for introducing of survey data. So when we have pre-coordinated concepts which contain question and answer, we may treat it as an event concept and may map it to event or to the historical concept when we're talking about the past of the patient. And here is my last slide. We have a lot of place for harmonization. We just somewhere in the beginning, and when we have a lot of standard concept, and we have several approaches for harmonization of data, of survey data, and mapping them to standard. But here's like a problem statement from my side. So here I invite you to the discussion, and maybe you have some insights of how we can, what we can do to improve our approaches and maybe introduce something new. Yeah.
Thanks, Masha. John?
Yes, I have a basic question. Can you go back a few slides to the one about several days, or you know, the one about some days?
Yeah, here?
Yeah, that's it. Almost every day. Yeah, I find it interesting that there's two standard concepts that are so similar semantically. Is it possible for a non-standard concept to map to more than one standard concept, or is that always a many to one? And I'm hoping the answer is that a non-standard concept always maps. Yeah, because it's a record. There's one record. The non-standard concept has a standard concept that it points to, so it's always just one. Okay, so that's a good thing. I just needed clarification on that.
Not always, but for most cases, it is true. So
there
is. But there are some cases when non-standard concept maps to two or maybe sometimes even more concepts, but all of these concepts are usually concepts itself, you know. So it's nausea and vomiting, and we map it to two separate concepts. One to nausea, and second one is to vomiting. But in case of these questions, yes, they are mapped one-to-one.
Yeah, but if I go look at concept ID 1332918, there's going to be a record and concept, and there's going to be a field in that record that's standard concept ID, right? And so the data structure limits you to just one standard concept, correct?
No. If you go in your CDM instance and try to find, I don't know, let's say it's condition, and you go into condition occurrence table and you try to find the standard concept, there would be one standard concept ID in the condition. What's the name? In the field for standard concept ID, and then you need to go to another record and you'll find another concept ID there. But source values will be the same for these two fields, because they map to many. They map to two. You must have only one standard, but you can have different non-standard codes.
So yeah, so I guess what you're saying is exactly what this slide is showing, is that you can have the same concept represented by two different standard concepts. So you can have almost every day, which is semantically more or less equivalent to a few times a month. So you could have two records in your observation table, and one could use a few times a month and the other could use almost every day. And so in that way, yes, there's two standard concepts for the same idea. Is this what you're saying?
It's not really, though. It's
not really this.
It's not too. It's not. They're not the same. A few times a month is like 2 times a month. Almost every day is like 20 days a month.
Okay.
That's like very different.
And all of these slides that describe a PPI approach and all of these current approaches to content mapping, including this slide, they are a little bit outdated, I would say, and it just shows you the state of some of the vocabulary. So, for example, PPI has been updated and has been introduced into standardized vocabularies many times. So it was not like one release for PPI and then we just stopped. No, it was every 6 months or every year over the years, we introduced new concepts, we fixed something, and the approach has changed. And as a result, we see that we can spot many mixed approaches in this particular vocabulary in the PPI. But going further, we have very stable UK biobank. And the UK biobank with precardinated pairs approach has also been discussed here. So we have this approach for vocabularies, for surveys, and we also have the approach to just put your concepts as non-standard or as standard codes. That's not the best approach from any point of view, but the thing is, if you want to introduce some survey that is basically curated by some organization, is used worldwide, then it can be inside vocabularies as standard. So basically, we have an approach with pre-coordinated pairs. One, we have approach when the concepts are standard, both questions and answers, and we also have the approach when both answers and questions are non-standard. But it's mostly for local use, so it will not be used on the network level. And all of the other approaches with these different mappings from questions to answers, from answers to other answers, and all of this mixed, we're trying not to do it because it's an unsustainable way to update vocabularies. And in my opinion, there is no one solution, but rather there's different approaches that, and we should come up with some set of clear rules. So we can say if the survey is standardized, for example, LOINC has many of them. Yeah. So if the survey is standardized as an instrument in the research, that maybe should be question and answer separately. If there's some local survey, maybe should be pre-coordinated pairs. So in my opinion, we should move in this direction and standardize the rules and then standardize the context. But if you say that we are not ready, you'll be absolutely wrong.
Well, I feel that this is very important to go back to what Nicole has been saying, and also to connect to what John asked for, which is how do people do it now? Well, this is how it's stored in vocabularies. We don't actually know how people use it in their research. And that's the big gap, because oftentimes it's teams who ETL the data and then a completely disjoint set of people who actually do research. And we've seen a couple of examples of very polarized use of surveys, up to the extent of we're actually not going to use Odyssey tooling, we're not going to use Odyssey methods, we just want a shell, which is probably not what we here strive for, because if you're only using a shell, then why bother converting the data to begin with? So even though, John, I understand your 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 desire to see how it's been done. I think that sort of goes back to Nicole's point, is that we actually don't know, and we're getting she's doing a wonderful job with collecting responses, but people are not being very proactive. So the stance of vocabulary team was and is that okay, we have, as Oleg very nicely outlined, and Masha, different ways of how the surveys is being handled right now in the vocabularies. But if somebody comes to us and says, we want a survey, we tell them, go to Nicole, talk to her, show your use case, let's discuss. Because we think that the way it's being used, the way the surveys are being used right now is totally not sustainable for any kind of network research because of all of this what you've seen. And I'm sorry, Safi, I hijacked your hand. I just wanted to make this point about like us really not feeling ready to propose any kind of solution because we don't know so much about how people do it and how they use it.
Sophia, do you want to make?
Yeah, yeah. So what we see in this slide is the approach that I would take in an ETL. Like if I have something almost every day is a non-standard, I'll take the standard. That's fine. That's what I would map to. But the problem I see is that this almost everyday lowing is pre-coordinated, and it says it's the answer of a different lowing question. And that is an issue, like, because then you're using something that it's not a pair. So the problem I see with all this is not that we need to create something new, is that maybe the pool of answers, like something like Laura said before, like the answers repeat a lot. So the pool of answers, if they're not pre-coordinated, you can use them for a lot of questions and relieve the vocabulary a lot, because these answers might be repeating if you pre-coordinate them like 10 times for one survey. Whilst you could have like one answer and you can use it without thinking, well, maybe someone will see this lowing code and think that it shouldn't be there because it's an answer to a different question.
I know. Yeah, I know. I was gonna say, yeah, that's something very interesting. I'm really glad you brought that up. So we took sort of approach in between, I think, what UK Biobank and all of us have done, and what Diane and others are doing by actually trying to do the using the vocabulary that exists. And so when we started, I was my team, so there was a limit to what I could do. So what I ended up doing was assigning concept IDs to help with our internal harmonization, but to also clearly define individual concepts so that hopefully it would facilitate mapping later. But we did exactly what you're talking about with the reusable responses. So for example, yes and no always have the concept IDs no matter what they're the answer to. And so that really helps a lot with programming, and it really helps with just like you always know, these are your options. And what gives you the specificity that you need is sort of, it's a different hierarchy than what you were describing, Laura, but we have a hierarchy set up. So we have so for example, we get data from different sources besides EHR and survey. So we have levels of hierarchy that define, this is a survey. Which particular survey is it? What question is this? And then what's the answer? And so when you pull it all together, this is the answer to age from the baseline, background, and overall health survey. But allows us to reuse those components so we're not overly proliferating the concept IDs. And so I certainly don't know how this could be repurposed. Again, this is what we're talking about, but I definitely see that point. Like, I don't want to have almost all day be so specific it only matches one question. And then I need another almost every day for a different question. It would be really nice to have sort of that mix and match ability and be okay with that. Like, it's not wrong to use it because that answer can go with a multitude of questions. So thanks for that comment. Laura?
Thanks. Just to build on that, I think we did something similar as well for the question. So since we use a lot of different validated questionnaires and not all of them have non-standard representations or for that matter, standard representations in the OMOP CDM, we also sort of qualified the constructs of the question. So for example, in this one, if you would rephrase it, so in your day-to-day life or in the last month, we have a lot of questions in the last month or in the last 7 days, how fatigued did you feel? So then we just used the concept of fatigue and had a qualifier value of in the last 7 days. And that could be used actually for a lot of different questions as well from different questionnaires, because they would swap between the measurement time, but they would still reference to the same sort of construct, the fatigue. And also if it wasn't there, then you could still miss that. So I think it goes for the questions as well in a similar way.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful, right? Because when we talk about, or at least when I think about a concept, fatigue means the same thing, regardless of what it's an answer to, right? So that's why, like in my head, it makes sense. We are down to a minute, and I certainly don't want to keep people any longer than necessary, but I'd love to first thank everybody for the discussion. It's been really helpful. I think we need more of these to kind of start getting our footing a bit more, but I also just wanted to talk about next steps, which again, I think involve discussion, but I'm wondering, Alexander and Anna and everybody from the vocabulary group, where can we continue these discussions so we can talk a little bit more? It's been very helpful to know that this is, how it's currently being done and how vocabulary supports it. And I think, we had that larger meeting with the group, and this is going to need support from CDM and Themis as well as we try to figure out best practices. So I'm wondering what our next steps are. Should we put together, discussion points and questions from this and then figure out, which cross-type meetings we can have, or I'm also open to like other suggestions.
Do you feel that you already have enough people who contributed to the landscape assessment, or are we still at the stage of like, let's get more people in?
It certainly couldn't hurt to do it again, just maybe now that we're getting a little bit more visibility. The other thing too that maybe we could hype, for lack of a better word, is that this group is actually going to be doing things at the Global Symposium. So working on a poster, we have the workshop, so maybe we could do it as a preamble to getting ready for that, and maybe even modify it a little bit based on some of the information we have so far. I do super appreciate everybody who's answered my request. So the Eden and UK Biobanks links have been put into this chat. So I'm like trying to get all this coordinated. But yeah, I think it might be worth doing again, like opening it for another 6 weeks maybe. So then I still have time to kind of compile and we can discuss before we get to the Global Symposium.
I'm laughing at the chat.
Oh.
Yeah. It's discussion points definitely would be good. It's always a challenge when there are so many different perspectives to come up with something that would fit all, but definitely outlining all of the options that we have on the table would be helpful. For instance, for John, it would be helpful to see what's there. So definitely outlining the discussion points would be good. But I actually don't have I'm sorry, I started speaking to say that I don't have a good stance on it. And the reason being that it's going to be such a big undertaking to come up with a model that's going to work for everybody. So I'm having even troubles, touching it.
I'm a big fan of iteration and low-hanging fruit. so I think and accepting that we might not get it right the first time. So it may be sort of, we start with things like these validated questionnaires where we know there's likely, or LOINC questionnaires or something where we know there's likely a lot of vocabulary that has standards. and work with that and try to figure out, okay, with this thing that's relatively simple, can we come up with some best practices? And what examples do we have of the mapping of these? And then iterate out to, okay, these are the most frequently asked questions across, you know, baseline questionnaires or overall health questionnaires or something. You know, so that's how I process things anyway, because I can never, like you said, it tried to look at, this is the thing we do that works for everybody, I think is a really big leap. But maybe we could start with, this will work for people using standardized clinical surveys, and then keep moving out from there.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
I love the low hanging fruit idea. I call it the base case as from a software perspective is what's the base case? What's the simplest use case and the simplest solution for that use case, and then build from there.
Yeah.
As I said before,
thanks for this presentation. This was great presentation and great discussion. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I do as well. Oleg, did you want to say one more thing before we close the meeting?
Oh yes, I didn't realize that we are out of time. I just wanted to say that I absolutely agree with Nicole with what you just said, specifically with this, that we should not standardize the surveys. We should probably standardize the use cases or standardize the approaches. So there may be different approaches inside the survey domain. So one for standardized clinical surveys and one for something else and one for another something else. Yeah. So yeah,
registries or things. Yeah. So awesome. Well, I concur with John. Thank you so much for the presentation and the discussion. I look forward to continuing this discussion, and especially for those of us that'll be there in person at the Global Symposium. But I'm really glad we're getting more involvement and more feedback and examples of what's being done, because that will really help us like define those different use cases and groups of surveys. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.